What happens when a government under pressure at home collides with global power politics abroad and the clock starts ticking? Here is the striking fact that frames everything. In just 2 weeks, human rights monitors estimate that between 116 and nearly 200 people have been killed in Iran amid nationwide protests, while the President of the United States openly weighs military options that could redraw the security map of the Middle East. The question is not whether tension is rising. The question is how far it goes and who controls what comes next. If this situation escalates into direct military action, the consequences would extend far beyond Iran's borders. If it stalls into a prolonged standoff, it could harden internal repression while destabilizing regional deterrence. And if it de-escalates, it may redefine how external powers respond to internal unrest in sovereign states. Each path carries risks not just for Iran and the United States, but for global energy markets, regional alliances, and an international system already stretched thin. To understand why this moment is so volatile, you have to begin with the protests themselves. They erupted roughly 2 weeks ago, initially driven by economic distress. Iran's currency has been sliding sharply, inflation has surged, and basic goods have become harder to afford for large segments of the population. What began as demonstrations over living costs quickly evolved into broader political unrest, with thousands of people gathering in cities across the country. According to the human rights activist news agency, protests have taken place in at least 574 locations across 185 cities, a scale not seen since the nationwide demonstrations of 2022-23. The Iranian state's response has been forceful. Independent groups estimate that at least 2,600 people have been detained, though official figures have not been released. Internet blackouts have lasted more than 60 hours at a time, according to NetBlocks, limiting the ability of journalists and international observers to verify events on the ground. Human rights organizations argue that these blackouts are designed to obscure the scale of casualties and suppress coordination among demonstrators. Casualty figures vary, but even the most conservative estimates point to a rapidly intensifying crackdown. US-based monitors report at least 116 deaths, while Norway-based Iran Human Rights has confirmed nearly 200 fatalities, with unverified accounts suggesting the number could be higher. Iranian state media, meanwhile, says dozens of members of the security forces have also been killed, reporting at least 109 security personnel deaths nationwide and 36 in just 2 provinces. These competing narratives underscore how contested the information space has become. Into this already volatile environment stepped the United States. President Donald Trump has publicly stated that he is considering a range of responses to Iran's actions, including military options, though no final decision has been made. US officials confirmed that preliminary plans have been presented, spanning from potential strikes to non-military measures. The administration has framed its posture as conditional, signaling that further escalation by Iranian authorities could trigger a response. From Tehran's perspective, these statements cross a dangerous threshold. Iran's parliamentary leadership has warned that any US military action would prompt retaliation not only against American forces, but also against Israeli territory. Iranian officials have emphasized that they would not wait passively after an attack, framing their posture as preemptive self-defense rather than delayed response. The Israeli military has acknowledged it is monitoring developments closely and has indicated it is prepared to act if necessary. This is where history matters. US-Iran relations have been adversarial for more than 4 decades, shaped by sanctions, proxy conflicts, and cycles of escalation and restraint. Iran's leadership views external pressure as an existential threat, often linking domestic unrest to foreign interference. Conversely, US policymakers have long debated whether internal protests represent an opportunity for change or a risk of regional chaos. That tension is not theoretical. It has shaped policy decisions from sanctions regimes to covert actions and open military confrontations. The regional context amplifies the stakes. Iran is not isolated. It sits at the center of a network of alliances and rivalries stretching from the Levant to the Persian Gulf. Any US strike, even a limited one, would likely trigger responses across this network. American military bases and naval assets are spread across the region, from Iraq and Syria to the Gulf states. Energy infrastructure, shipping lanes, and civilian populations all sit within range of escalation dynamics that are difficult to control once unleashed. Now consider two critical what-if scenarios. What if the United States carries out limited strikes aimed at signaling deterrence rather than regime change? In that scenario, Iran could respond asymmetrically through cyber operations, proxy actions, or calibrated missile strikes, while stopping short of full-scale war. Oil markets would almost certainly react, with even temporary disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz pushing prices upward. Countries in South Asia, heavily dependent on energy imports, would feel immediate economic pressure, while Middle Eastern states would face renewed security dilemmas over hosting foreign forces. But what if no strike happens and the standoff drags on? Protests inside Iran could either lose momentum under sustained repression or evolve into more organized resistance. Prolonged instability would strain Iran's economy further, deepen its isolation, and potentially increase reliance on regional partners. For the global order, this would reinforce a pattern where internal crises become prolonged pressure points rather than decisive turning moments, complicating diplomacy and crisis management. Beyond the Middle East, the implications ripple outward. In South Asia, where regional powers balance relationships with both Washington and Tehran, escalation would complicate energy security and diplomatic alignments. India, for example, has historically maintained ties with Iran while deepening strategic cooperation with the United States. A sharper confrontation would narrow diplomatic space and force harder choices. In the broader global system, this crisis intersects with questions about sovereignty, intervention, and human rights. When external powers openly contemplate action in response to internal repression, it raises precedents that other states watch closely. The balance between protecting civilians and respecting national borders is one of the most contested issues in international politics. And how this episode unfolds will inform future responses elsewhere. The information war is also part of the battlefield. Conflicting casualty numbers, restricted internet access, and competing narratives make it difficult to establish a shared factual baseline. That uncertainty increases the risk of miscalculation. When leaders operate with incomplete or politicized information, decisions taken under pressure can spiral faster than intended. As night falls on this crisis, the central tension remains unresolved. Protesters continue to gather despite arrests and surveillance. Security forces signal that enforcement has intensified. External powers issue warnings while preparing contingencies. Each actor believes restraint lies with the other side, even as the margin for error narrows. What you should watch for next is not just whether a strike occurs, but how language changes. Shifts in tone, movements of military assets, and signals to allies often precede action. Equally important are signs inside Iran, whether protests sustain momentum, fragment, or transform. These dynamics will shape whether this moment becomes a turning point or another chapter in a long confrontation. Power, after all, is not only about force, it is about timing, perception, and the ability to step back before momentum takes over. In the space between warning and action, history is often decided. And sometimes the most dangerous moment is not when the first shot is fired, but when everyone believes the other side will blink first.